What is up, it's a Figure Hunter, and today we have the full and final review of the Amazfit T-Rex Ultra watch that came out a couple of weeks ago. I've taken it through a bunch of workouts and I've looked at it in a bunch of different ways. And so today we're going to go through the ins and outs. If you like this review, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing for more. I've had the opportunity to test the Amazfit T-Rex Ultra alongside the Garmin Forerunner 265 and the 965. So it's really helped me to focus on what I like and what I don't like about this watch. So in the ins and outs, we're going to look at three basic things. Number one, we're going to look at the watch just in general as a smart-ish watch, a smartwatch-ish, the build quality, the feature set, the functionality in simple terms. Number two, we're going to look at the wellness and the recovery side, whether it's a training rigor that you're wanting to recover from or just general life that you want to know your wellness, insight into your wellness. And number three, we're going to look at the workouts, the workout evaluation metrics, and the training evaluation metrics over the course of time and what value those offer. What we're not going to look at in this video are GPS samples, because I am not a runner, and this whole YouTube channel is for testing, tracking devices for the purpose of CrossFit training, high intensity interval training versus all the running, swimming, and biking reviews that are out there. So we're not going to look at the GPS, and what we're also not going to look at in detail is the full heart rate testing analysis I did, because that is found in a separate video in the description below, along with the chapters for the different sections, those three primary sections of this video. So again, watch in general all the basics of it, the wellness and recovery, and the workouts and training aspects. So looking in general at the watch, we're going to just sort of focus on the design and just sort of look at the quality of the design and the different ways that it functions as a watch. We're going to look at just the functions within, the apps, or just the design of the user interface, and then the reliability of it as a basic smartwatch. And speaking of reliability, one thing I forgot to mention in this next sort of hands-on section is the reliability of the battery life, because that has been awesome. It's rated to have, 20 plus days. I can't remember what the exact stat if you're not using always on and not really doing heavy use. But it's rated to have 9 days if you have always on display and are doing heavy use, periodic GPS, just a lot of use out of it. And that is my use case. Always on display. I did have the backlight setting to the auto adjustment, which actually turned out to be pretty good. It would automatically adjust to be brighter in bright lights and dimmer in dim lights. And it worked great. And I was getting about 8.5 days throughout my testing, between 8 and 9 days throughout my testing with the watch, which is fantastic for a watch of this bright and brilliance and the AMOLED screen that's on it. So let me lead with that out of the gate. The battery life has been great, 8.5 days with always on display and full usage. So let's look at the general overview of the watch. All right, here you have it, the Amazfit T-Rex Ultra. And if you see any sort of rotating, if it looks like the screen is flickering, it is absolutely not in real life. So don't let that fool you. The screen is big and vibrant and beautiful. I have it set to max brightness. The colors are rich. It is very responsive. We're going to look at a lot of different aspects of it, but starting with the design. So the casing is obviously a larger casing, and the weight is obviously a little heavy. It has an all stainless bezel, has a stainless accent here and stainless back. Buttons may be stainless as well. It's got this cool hinge system for the band itself, which I just love the design of this, and I feel like it's really comfortable, possibly because of this. The only thing I don't love is the fixed band. The band is, from the design features, is the only piece that I don't actually love. I mean, it is perfectly comfortable in every way I could possibly imagine, even with its extra weight, because you can feel that it has some heft to it. But I think it looks really cool with the stainless. It's like a complete opposite. I really disliked the look of the T-Rex with the plastic model, because I felt like it just looked like a rinky-dink little fake watch. But this feels and looks like a solid watch. So enough about the wrist aspects or the design aspects. I think the wrist raise works well. One thing that's also a nice feature is you push this little A, and it's the automatic backlight adjustment. So if you have it always on, like I've been testing it with always on, you can obviously have it automatically dim down or brighten up depending on the lighting condition around you. That has worked really well. even looking at the watch faces that they have available. So let's look at it. Some of the faces, we're not going to look at it in great detail. I really like the analog watch faces they have available as options, but I feel like they have a great library. Some of them are stupid. I think any of these really busy ones are kind of dumb. This one's kind of just left it on there because it actually has an electric background, just to show like the, so power intense. It does tell you power intensive if you have something. Single charts, so I like this as a data face. Like if you're just going to see your heart rate over time, just lots of data fields. None of these are actionable like they are with the Garmin, or an Apple Watch, but they're not actionable, but they are pretty. And so the watch faces themselves, you have a big simple clock. I love the aviator look. Like look, I mean, it just looks really sharp on the watch when you have this sort of aviator appearance. It, to me, looks like the Mark line of watches from Garmin. The other thing that's really, I think, noteworthy is the always-on display for some of these watches. I feel like is kind of cool. So you can see the always-on display for just a couple of them. They just have a really good simplicity to them, and you get it to activated. But there's another one, so just clean and simple. But just, I feel like in general they have a good balance of all of it, but really good watch faces. The other things that I like about the watch, if you're just looking at like features, is I do like simple things like the weather feature. So here's what the apps look like. The watch is responsive, it's snappy, there's no delay, there's no lag time, there's no problems there. Um, you swipe from the top to get your settings, which you can customize all this, which I think is great. It makes everything really easy to access. You get the menu items by swiping left. Swiping right, you get your notifications. All the notifications come in really smoothly. They all have the right icon. Even if I'm getting a notification for work, something that maybe the Garmin wouldn't pick up the icon for, they all pick it up. It gets picked up here, and just useful there. And then, apps that I really like when this just talking about general things, I like that it's going to show the trajectory of temperature, because you can see, okay, it's going to get cooler, and how much cooler is it going to get over the night, so I can prepare, how is it going to be throughout the day, how's the forecast look. I like this this is when you pull up from the bottom, this is like a summary of information. It's sort of like their widgets where you can see whether you have your last night's sleep, your alarms, and we're going to look at those things specifically in some of the feature sets. But just really overall, a very has it all, sort of the basics for what you would want for a watch. Let's look at the app just in simple terms. All right, so this is the Zepp app. Just to give you a basic overview, you have your activities. You can change the order of all of these pieces of information, these subsets of information. You have activities, sleep, breathing quality, which is also built into sleep, stress and blood oxygen, exercise status, sort of like your training status, heart rate, coaching. You could play sleep melodies if you want to pay for a subscription, steps, calories, PAI, which is sort of an evaluation of how much intensity you've had this week, weight and BMI, as well as some quick access. So that is really what's going to make this up. You can rearrange the order, but that's the simple summary for the app. And then if you go into the watch itself, you can see it's just got all the basic settings. You can go into a wide array of animated and non-animated custom backgrounds. Really, really pretty extensive. Huawei looked like it could have a good watch store, but it never really synced up here in the US to give you this access to watch faces. But the Amazfit gives you access to all of it. All the settings are really pretty easy to navigate and adjust. They're all really simple, so nothing complex. You can turn on the level of heart rate monitoring. It's only going to do it at best once a minute for heart rate. You can turn on all the different types of things you might want to turn on, which we're not going to dive into. I just want to show you an overview of the app. It's simple enough that you could dive in and figure out most of the basics for this without much difficulty. Now, what do I think about the Amazfit T-Rex Ultra as a watch? The look, design, the fit, the feel, the function, I love it. I actually really like it. It's really simple, which I like, but it does the simple things well, whether it's like weather, whether it's a little summary of widgets, which takes you to primary access points of information, just getting into the settings quickly, everything just functioning, notifications coming in smoothly with big bright colors and icons. It has been fantastic. I love the build quality of it, the feel, everything about it I feel like is just great. So that wraps up the general section. So next we're going to look at the wellness and recovery section. I did not look at the watch to see, can I see my sleep data on the watch, or what is my stress score on the watch. I never looked at those. So we're just actually going to go to the app and the app only for this section to see how it summarizes or provides direction or gives insights or advice based on what wellness aspects it surveys for you. All right, there's only a few basic aspects to wellness tracking. The most bedrock being sleep, stress, and blood oxygen. So we're going to go in reverse order. The blood oxygen seems fine. I would think this is probably accurate. You can swing your finger. I don't know if I got a 93, but in general, compared to what I'm getting for nightly blood oxygen, it's about the same as I'm getting on the Whoop and on the Garmin. So I feel like in stillness, it's been fine. I can't say if it's accurate in high altitude or specialty settings, but the pulse ox has been fine. The stress tracking is interesting because it'll just evaluate if you're stressed throughout the day, and it does not work at all. It only evaluates your stress if you are perfectly still. Therefore, it only evaluates your stress in those moments of life when you are not stressed, meaning you're asleep. Whole work day, nothing there. Oh, I didn't wear it that day. I left it at the gym. So here's another work day. Come on, lock on. During the stress of the workday, you don't get to see if you're stressed. Now, I picked some up there. That's really interesting. But the bulk of the day, not working, therefore not helpful. If they did something about like evaluating stress and they compared it to like the Garmin Body Battery, that would be something useful because it at least is picking up a metric while you're asleep. So blood oxygen is fine. I don't find that to be useful at all from any watch. Stress doesn't really work for the times when you would want to see if you're stressed. So that list leaves sleep. And the sleep, will say that I like that it has all these components, and we're going to dive into each of these components. But before I get into each of the components, the one thing I would say is that it only really gives you primary direction with this sleep score at the top. Now, I got 6.5 hours, 6 hours, 45 minutes sleep. It's giving me an 81. Okay, fine. Maybe I'll take that. Let's look at other nights. 6 hours and 23 minutes, I got a 77. That's not so good. 6 hours and 13 minutes, a 72. 7 hours, okay, 79. Maybe that's fair. 5 hours and 45 minutes, and I got a 73. So what do we see? Whether it's 7 hours or 5 hours, I'm getting 70, mid 70s. Therefore, the information's not worthwhile. So the sleep score itself is not worthwhile, which is the best quantification of, your recovery period, because it's the only quantifiable amount, directionable amount. I do like that you can dive into any of these and it'll tell you your time of sleep. That's good. That's useful because, pure amount of time in bed. There's a lot of different theories over whether you need the accuracy of the stages to determine if you are getting good recovery. A lot of times it's just based on how many hours of sleep you get. So your regularity, the time you fall asleep, the time you wake up, that's helpful. But I just like that you can dive into any of these. Here, you can look at a big breakdown. But the biggest thing is you can see your averages over time for deep over the course of the last 7 days. You can see your REM over the course. A lot of there's been studies or reviewers that have done more of a scientific approach and say that the Amazfit is not tracking sleep stages correctly. But there's also a possibility that if it's at least doing it incorrectly all the time, then you would be able to evaluate some of these parameters because it's just comparing to its own baseline. So are you getting what it perceives to be your most deep or restful periods, or your REM? Is it staying consistent with your baseline or not? See the awake times, heart rate, the heart rate, kind of a cool graph. You can see where your heart rate was at different periods and what sleep stage they say you were in. Over the last 7 days, that's actually useful. Respiratory rate, that's actually useful for just a health metric. So it's got little tidbits of usefulness. And then the breathing quality, I thought that was really interesting. It tests for hypopnea, like sleep apnea, I guess. But I didn't have any. I can't tell you if it's right or not because I don't have that problem. But it's useful in a minor way because you can dive into any of these areas and at least compare them to their relative baselines. But it's not useful in the most important way in giving you a score that you can make decisions on for your day. So that summarizes its wellness. So again, blood oxygen, it looks like it's accurate. I don't find it that useful. Stress, that would be useful, but it is not tracking your stress in the times when you most need to evaluate stress. Sleep, it's giving me a good summary of information where you can dive into details, but it's not giving me any real quality uh, direction with the sleep score itself. Now, what did I think in summary of the wellness? I can tell you and summarize it in one simple statement. At the end of the 2 weeks of testing, I didn't really care what it had to say. I really didn't look at any of the stats. I didn't feel like the sleep score was always the same, whether I got 5.5 hours of sleep or nearly 8 hours of sleep. I got a 75 or an 81 in that little tiny window of range. Did not provide any direction. I didn't use any of the sort of comparison to baseline features. I have other devices to rely on. Obviously, I'm testing and tracking other devices. It just coming from other devices where you get valuable direction for how you might want to adjust your day or how bad you slept or your level of recovery. This just didn't provide anything that I found worthwhile. I literally just didn't care to look at the sleep analysis every day or what it might say because it always looked the same, whether it was a bad night of sleep or a great night of sleep. So it didn't tell me anything of value. And then the aspects like stress tracking specifically, just in my opinion, just didn't work altogether. If it can't track your stress in the times of the day when you're most stressed, then you can't say it does any stress tracking. So that's my unfortunate summary for the wellness and recovery. Last, we're going to look at the workout evaluation, sort of the evaluation of how it gauged your rigor for that workout, and the training direction and analysis over time. Let's dive in. Okay, so when looking at it for a sports and training watch, there's a few basic things you would see on the watch. Obviously, the first is the heart rate accuracy, which I just did a full review for, and you can find the link to that in the description below. But the heart rate accuracy was excellent at times and completely faulty at other times. I'll give you one tip in a second for how to make sure it's at least as close to accurate, but I found it was just too inconsistent. Although it can be trusted, you just don't know, if it's going to have one of those faulty workouts or one of those faulty situations. The other way you could make sure that it's correct is I just tend to go, no, I don't want to do that. I tend to go just connect it to a Bluetooth. This is how you would do it. You go into settings. It says, do you want to connect a workout accessory? There's my HRM Pro. It's a Garmin, and it had no problem connecting. It didn't even take over the watch. Another smaller manufacturer, I think it was Huawei, if you connect it to a Bluetooth, it would connect to a Bluetooth chest strap, but it would basically, the chest strap would not be able to connect to some of the other devices that I wanted to connect to. So it was sort of problematic there, but that works well. If you're going to look at using it for a workout, the first thing is in the workout, you're going to go to choose it. This is a tip that's important to note is when you go to choose your workouts, you have this long list. And I always just choose cross training because I'm primarily only testing it for CrossFit and high intensity interval training. You want to hit this little guy here because that's where you're going to add it to your memory list, your favorites. It took me forever to find that. So here's where you would edit some of these, but you also would add, and the last activity you add gets moved to the top. So that's why cross training was nice and easy there. If you get into the workout, here's the tip I was going to give you about giving it the best accuracy. When it's on your wrist, sometimes it'll take 30 to 60 seconds to lock in on your heart rate. Always make sure you see a number here before you start the workout. The settings are really, I turn the assistant off. I don't want it talking to me in the middle of a workout. So you're going to start here. This is just a couple of data screens. You can do 3 pages of data. You can have just a heart rate graph, and then you can add up to 6 data fields. You can do your lap time if you want to count your time per round and your last lap time and your last round time. You just can't do a lap counter. You can see aerobic training effect here. The training load I've built so far in the workout here. I just did this just to show you a sample of what a workout might look out, but this is what the types of field, this is what you would see in a workout itself. If you were looking at the page, it locks sometimes, so you have to push a button to get it to unlock, just as a sample. And then you can swipe right if you want to change your music on your watch. You know, if you are using MP3s built in, that's the only type of thing you could use. Or you want to finish. So no, I'm not going to save it. I'm just going to delete it. So then after you get done with the workout, how does it look? Come on. So we want to go here, workout history. Now this is how the summary of information, it always starts you with your training effect. I really like that. It shows your aerobic on one side, your anaerobic on the other. Sorry, my timeout is a little quick. And the total training load, the epoch for this particular workout, which is another important metric. You see like how much exertion is your exertion score. Then you can see all the stats here, your zones, as well as a pretty heart rate graph. And that's pretty much it. So those are the stats you see, primarily driven off the training, the rigor evaluation for aerobic or anaerobic or training load. So then you have your training load over the last 7 days. This is where I see continual problems, and I'll talk more about this in the summary, but the training load is just always maxed out. No matter what I do, even if I took 2 days off before working out today just to not touch the watch, to not give it any training load, and it's still saying too high. Now, it was saying overreaching, but it's always been pedal to the metal, dial down the whole time after about 2 days of workouts. And I'm talking just 1 hour classes. My recovery time did come down, but with the buildup of 3 workouts in a row that I had earlier this week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, it was at 93, and it was just sitting at 93. I think it came down to 70 at one point, but just sitting high. So it is really nice that they have training load, they have aerobic and anaerobic effect, and that they have recovery time. All 3 of them are too high to be useful. So you can see that recovery time, this is the most moderate it's been. But here's the conversion rate. The training load is always about 50% more than the Garmin, and the recovery time is always about 50% more. So like if the Garmin is saying 20 hours, this is saying 30. And so you have to take it and bring it down if you want to make any use of it, but that makes it totally not useful. Same thing we see in workout history. You just go to this last workout, maxed out, aerobic and anaerobic. This was a really hard workout, but the epoch was nowhere near 367 from a 1 hour class, with a 4.6 on the aerobic training effect, 4.7 on anaerobic. Now, if you look at the stats, I spent a lot of time in zone 5, but I spent only 13 minutes zone 5, 16 in zone 4. The heart rate wasn't atrocious as far as like how much I killed myself, but the watch thinks I maxed out everything everywhere. So it makes all these training evaluations, unfortunately, not useful because they do not feel reliable. Let's look at what you can see as far as workout data, workout evaluation in the app itself. Okay, so looking at what you see from a training standpoint, number one, you can go into your training history and you can see the amount of time that you've spent training, all your activities. You can look at it for the month. You can look at it over the last 7 days. You can look at it over the last year when you've had your training times. But the biggest thing is what it tells you about the workout itself. So we go into today's workout. It wasn't the hardest workout, minor amount of time in zone 5. This was connected to a chest strap, so the heart rate graph is 1,000% accurate. You can see your zones, and then you can see your training effect. So the training effect here, again, was not the hardest workout. It was like a 7-minute AMRAP after an EMOM of strict presses, but not the hardest workout, but it gave me overly high scores in both categories. You can see a detailed data, but that's really, not much to it. Just is a summary of basic information. But that's all you get when you go to evaluate your workout in the app itself. And then the other thing you could see from a training evaluation is they don't give you your recovery time. They just give you this exercise status. And up until this morning, it literally did not show my training load. Or it showed the last training load I recorded, like the last device I tested, a GTR4. But now it is actually all synced up. So you can see your training load over time. But what I have found is if I had not worn the watch on my workout on 4.4, what would it have said? It would just have stayed up here at the top. So it built it, and then it's just staying at the peak because it is viewing every workout as maxing out my aerobic anaerobic effect and my aerobic effect. Therefore, it is always translating that to a high epoch or training load for that particular workout. Therefore, it is always going to be overreaching tragically because they do have the backbone. The other thing you could see is your trends of VO2 max if you were a runner, which I'm not testing this for running. So when you summarize what value for your training do you get out of the Zepp app, you get an evaluation for each individual workout, and you get this simple chart here for your training load and a little chart you can scan across. So not a lot of detail, although at least they have the backbone if they could just update the algorithm to make the training effect, training load, all those things more accurate. Now, what do I think of the workout evaluation aspects, and the training aspects? And the first thing I'll touch on is the heart rate accuracy, because in my video I said it's just, I couldn't be trusted. But if you look at the charts, it is picking up accurately good bulks of the workout. I still feel like the heart rate accuracy is okay on here. It's better than for sure better than the older Coros models of watches like the Apex Pro and Past and Vertex 2 Beyond, backwards. It's better than the Garmin Phoenix 6 series, and the 945 and 245 was the Elevate 3.0. It's better than the Suunto 9 Peak that I tested, because Suunto's gone through some iterations of the heart rate. Suunto 7, way better than that, like a million times. But it's just unreliable. And the fact you can connect it to a chest strap, for those of you in the CrossFit or high intensity interval, you always should just be connecting to a chest strap, because that's the way to make it useful. But whether you have perfect heart rate accuracy or not, more importantly, I had that same feeling with the workout analysis that I did with the wellness and recovery analysis. After 2 weeks, I just didn't care what it said, because none of it felt accurate or useful. It has all the primary components. You've got training impact, like, are you pushing your aerobic capacity higher? Are you pushing your anaerobic capacity higher? Looking at the aerobic and anaerobic training effect. It's got training load. It shows you your load score, your epoch from that one workout, and a chart over time, and it gives you a recovery time for your next hard workout. But you could see over and over again, it was totally worthless, because in almost as long as I used it, if I did 2 workouts in a row, I would see from my 1 hour class of CrossFit, it tell me I need to take 4 days off. And it continued to tell me from my 1 hour class of CrossFit, I still need to take 4 days off. So I just stopped looking at it, except for the pure amusement of it. It looked beautiful, like the way they do the pictures and the colors on the screen all looks great. It just didn't add any worthwhile value to what would be a great backbone. So in summary, I actually loved it as just a watch, because I felt like it was great looking. It felt solid. It felt strong. It felt like good weight all around. And the primary watch aspects, the smart watch-ish or the smart-ish watch aspects, all worked perfectly. Ability to adjust settings. It all worked. Watch faces, wrist raises, auto timeout, all of it, except for all the primary aspects you would want to buy a device like this for in 2023. The wellness, the recovery, the training aspects, it's all the same as it was before. As I've tested Amazfit devices, the GTR4, the T-Rex Pro, the GTR3, they all have been showing the same exact thing. No stress, no real quantifiable information on the wellness side, and the training effect aspects, the training load aspects, and the recovery time aspects all peaked out, and they never drop off the red line. So unfortunately, I think that Amazfit needs to change. They've got the beautiful watch down pat. The GTR4 is a good looking watch at a totally inexpensive price. The T-Rex Ultra is a great looking watch at a reasonable price. They need just to transition the focus and completely focus on the sports science side of their watch production, and come to the table with a legitimate offering or a competitive offering, because they have the looks, design, build quality, and price on point. So they need to transition, because unfortunately, all of the sports science stuff is not useful in its current state to me. So with that, that is the full and final review for the Amazfit T-Rex Ultra. It's the Fit Gear Hunter. Thanks so much for watching.